Here on Daf Ayin Dalid, we discussed the concept called v'chai bahem, which is pikuach nefesh, that overrides all the averos of the Torah, because v'chai bahem v'lo sheyomus bahem, with the exception of the gimel averos chamuros and other averos b'shas hashmad or b'far hesya, where we have a din of yehorg val yav. So again, as a general rule, it's v'chai bahem. And we were wondering, with regard to the exceptions to the rule, where we apply the principle of yeharig vel yavar, is there a distinction between the gimel averos chamuros and the din of shas hashmad ufar hesya? Namely, that with regard to the gimel averos chamuros, we completely suspend the principle of v'chai bahem v'lo sheyomus bahem, and pikuach nefesh does not have the power to override these three averos chamuros because of the chomer ha'isa, the chomer ha'avera. So the matir of pikuach nefesh doesn't apply at all in these three averos. But in the case of shar averos, those are not averos chamuros. Norvos, there's halach of shas hashmad or halach of far hesya. Their pikuach nefesh will be chal and will override the avera. But we have another mitzvah which is called Kiddush HaShem, and that applies b'shas hashmad even b'tzina or shalo b'shas hashmad b'far hesya. And that's a separate obligation of Kiddush HaShem. And the Kiddush HaShem, in effect, in practical terms, will neutralize or remove the heter pikuach nefesh. But it's not because of the chumras avera, inherent to the avera and its chumra, but rather because of the mitzvah of Kiddush HaShem. And Kiddush HaShem is mafkia pikuach nefesh. Now, within the Gimel Averos themselves, we might put Avodah Zarah and Shvichas Damim on two sides of the equation, because whereas in Avodah Zarah, we derive it from V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha, and that tells me that we don't violate Avodah Zarah, so that reflects on the chumrah of Avodah Zarah. But in the case of Shvichas Damim, if you ask me why there's no mati, there's no heter pikuach nefesh v'chai bahem, that's because the svara of my chazis, which is the last piece of Gemara that we looked at. I mean, we didn't get into it in great detail. But it's not really the chumras havera that's mafkia the v'chai bohem, but the fact that there's another v'chai bohem, my chazis, how can you choose one v'chai bohem over the other v'chai bohem? So you're going to live and he's going to die. I mean, that's not something that you can determine on your own. And therefore, my chazis, you have to be passive. So as a result of that svara, your personal pikuach nefesh is not going to trump yenim, someone else's pikuach nefesh. So it's not like the case of Avodah Zarah, we have a gzeres hakosov and a derivation that there's no heter v'chai bahem vis-a-vis the avera of Avodah Zarah. But then we get to the case of Nara Murasa. Now it's a little bit strange, because we derive Nara Murasa through a hekesh to Rotzeach. And when you think about it, the basic dinim are fundamentally different one from the other, because in the case of Ritzicha, we have the svar of my chazis, whereas in the case of Nara Marasa, there's no my chazis over here. All you can talk about is the chumras havera of Gili Arayas, and that's why it's Teharig Val Tava. So Rav Soloveitchik is bothered by this, and I think Reb Chaim also is bothered by this, as to why through a hekesh, the Torah allows us to derive Nar Marasa from Rotzeach. I mean, they're so fundamentally different. Rotzeach is a svar of my chazis, and Nar Marasa, you're telling me something about the Chumas Havera of Gili Arayos. Okay. Now, we've mentioned in the past that the Rambam in Perkei Milchas Yisod Torah Halacha Daled speaks about onshim in a case where he was obligated to give up his life and he failed to do so. Do we punish him for the Avera? And the Rambam writes, Kol Misha Nemer Bo Yehorg Val Yavor V'lo Nerag Harei Machalas Hashem, but Afal Pikein Mipnei Sha'ovar Ba'ones Ein Malkin Oso V'Ein Tzorch Lo M'Shem Memisin Oso Shenemar V'Nasati Panai Ba'ishahu Mipi Ashmuel Lomdu Hahu V'Lo Ones V'Lo Muter. So since he, let's say, worshipped an idol under the pressure of his life, in other words, his life was at stake, is therefore he's considered an onus. Again, he shouldn't have done so because of the mitzvah of Kiddush HaShem and Yehorg Val Yavor, but we cannot punish him because at the end of the day, it wasn't his will as a deliberate decision. He only did it under the pressure of an onus. However, the Kesef Mishnah quotes the Ramach, Rav Moshe Cohen, who says that Kol Misha Ovar V'lo Nerag is Bezdin Memisan also. So you may recall that we had three shitos. We have the Rambam on one extreme, Rav Moshe Cohen on the other extreme, the Ramach, quoted by the Kesef Mishnah. According to the Rambam, in all cases of Yehorg Val Yavor, you are not punished if you violate the mandate of Yehorg Val Yavor and you violate the Isur. According to the Ramach, we have the other extreme, and that is whenever it says Yehorg Val Yavor, Bezdin Memisano. So in the middle, we had a shita that was quoted by the Ran in the name of Rabbeinu David, which is neither like the Rambam nor like the Ramach, that with regard to the Gimel Averos Chamuros, he is Nerad. But with Shara Averos B'Shas Hashmad of Farhesia, then if he violated the Avera and he wasn't Nerag, he's Potter. So we want to get a feeling for these three shitos. I begin to understand Rabbeinu David intuitively because, as we said before, with regard to the three Averos, there's no V'chai Bohem. If there's no V'chai Bohem, then Rabbeinu David, like the Ramach before him, is maintaining that if the Torah requires you to give up your life, so then it's not called onus, and you will be punished with the due punishment. But that's only with the Gimel Averos Chamuros because there's no Pikuach Nefesh. There's no V'chai B'hem to be matir. But in Shara Averos B'Farhesia or B'Shas Hashmad B'Tzina, there's Pikuach Nefesh. So you can't be punished for the Avera because Pikuach Nefesh removes that Avera. Is matir that Avera. What you have a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, but we're not going to punish you for a bittul mitzvah aseh. If, on the other hand, I want to go with the approach of the Ramach, I might say that through Kiddush Hashem, we undermine and neutralize Pikuach Nefesh, even in the cases of Shas Hashmad and B'far Hesed. And once we neutralize Pikuach Nefesh, then Memeli you get punished for that crime. And then you have the Rambam Shita that you can't punish a person technically because he was honest. So we have two issues here and three shitos. Right? We have one issue as to whether or not onus will apply when the Torah requires you to give up your life. The Rambam says onus still applies because he didn't violate the Avera deliberately and out of his own free will. Whereas the other shita, let's take the Ramach, would say that there's no onus over here when you had an intellectual, calm, deliberate decision, whether it's your life or the Avera, and the Torah requires you to give up your life, then if you decide not to do so, you're guilty for, and there's no onus. Then we have a second issue. Even if I grant the Ramach, okay, there's no onus, but there might be pikuach nefesh. So that's going to produce the shita, the third shita of compromise shita of Rabbeinu David, that pikuach nefesh doesn't apply to the big three, but it does apply to Shar Averos. All right. So let's take a look at the Gemara now on Daf Ayin Dalid. Rotzeach gufe minole svarahu. Tahu diasel kami de Rava, de Rabba. Vi amar li mari durai zil katli leplanya vilav katil nulach. Amar le likteluch velo tiktal de mai chazis mi emer didach sumuch tfei dilma damach tahu gavra sumuch tfei. So I always forget, Steve, do you have the Masifta on Sanhedrin? You do. So take a look at footnote number Lamed Gimel here on page Ayin Dalid. He says, Kol HaHeter lavar averos b'mokum pikuach nefesh nemar lematoras hatolos nefashos. Right? The Torah says, V'chai bohem, in order to save human life. But Khan, here in this case, Gamim Yavor V'lo Yehareg, if he violates the Isur of Lo Sirta, is Ta'abi Nefesh Misrael. So what did you gain over here by applying V'chai Bohem? V'nimtzeis Ha'avera Suya V'nefesh Yisrael Neveres. So even after you do the Avera, which was meant to save human life, at the end, somebody died. So therefore there's no heter. And now he quotes the Yad Ramah. Matar Sachayim B'olam Hazeh, this sounds philosophical, he lekayim es mitzvahs habore. Okay, that makes sense. Yomru Chazal, the Gemara in Yoma, Shatam shebachal Shabbos latzos nefesh. So mishum shator omer chalel Shabbos havkus keishish mo Shabbos harbe. V'kan kevan she'einonu yodim al mi mehem nigzera aruchas yomim v'yochel lekayim yosef mitzvos mechaver lachein oselo largas Hashem. So we're only going to allow violating the Torah law to expand the number of mitzvahs that you're going to be fulfilling. So now go figure out who of these two people is going to fulfill more mitzvahs by having an arichas yom? And I guess there's no way of determining that. Therefore, you're not allowed to kill him. Okay. Now, the next piece of Gemara, we have the two nuschos of Rav Yochanan, the Rav Dimi, and Ravin, and this we learned last week. Rav Dimi is talking about Gzeres Shas Hashmad, and Ravin is talking about Bifar Hesed. Now, Ravin says that Bifar Hesed, you have to give it your life in public, even on a mitzvah kala. My mitzvah kala, Omar Rava Bar Rav Yitzchak Omar Rav, and here we turn to Ayin Dalet Amud Beis Afilu Lishanoye Arkisa de Mesanim. So the Ma'ane says to the Jew, I want you to change the color of your shoelace. So I assume the Jews maybe wore white or probably black shoelaces. I don't know. The guy wants them to put on red shoelaces like the rest of the goyim. So the Jews wore their shoes and their shoelaces in a kind of tznius, a kind of modest way, and the goyim wanted to be more flashy about it. And so the guy is attacking the Jewish institution of the color of the shoelaces. And the Jews have a minhag to wear their shoelaces a certain color. And the guy wants to say, I'm going to kill you unless you change your shoelaces to look like ours. He has here a suffix in footnote number Aleph here. Are we talking about the tsuras hakshira, maybe the way they tie the knots, or the tseva retzuos, the way we explained it, the color of the shoelaces? Ha-Yehudim hayu koshrim b'tseva lavan. I thought it was black, but he says, no, the Jews did white. It's like, I don't know if you ever heard the phrase Weisse Socken, white socks. Some of the Hasidim wear white socks. Vagoyim Shachar. Or Yehudim Kashru b'Shachar. Or maybe the Jews tied their shoelaces when they're black. Vagoyim Edom. Oh, that's what I mentioned before. The Goyim used red, more flashy color. Kosav Arif. Shatam sheshinu miminag hagoyim. Why did the Jews set up their own, custom as far as the type of shoelaces they were? Al menas shelo lilbosh kim malbusheim. So the Rif is saying that it wasn't just that, the Jews sociologically developed, white shoelaces, black shoelaces, but that was the way the Jew wanted to identify himself, right? Like we say about the Jews of Mitzrayim, Shloshinu es Malbushim, they wanted to be different in their levush from the Goyim. And to avoid the Iser of B'chukoseim lo telecha, that we don't imitate the Goyim. And he has to give up his life b'shas hashmad, not to violate B'chukoseim lo telecha. As if to say, I'm making a statement, I want to identify as a Jew. So it comes out that according to the Rif, the changing of one's garment, or in this case, one's shoelaces, would tantamount, would involve a violation of a lav d'oraisa b'chukoseim. Rashi says it's only a minhag. According to Rashi, the Iser of Malbushe Goyim is not minat Torah. It's only a minhag. Okay then.